Welcome to our webinar with DIY Coaching Boston. We're going to give people a few minutes to join. We're seeing some new attendees joining us, so we'll give it a couple of minutes to get started, and then we'll go ahead and join. If in the meantime you are joining us now for the first time, or even if you've attended some of our previous webinars with Sydney or with the Principal Center, feel free to type into the chat where you're joining us from. We're excited to have an interactive conversation with you guys today, so we're looking forward to learning more from you as well. If you've never used the Zoom webinar platform before, you should see at the bottom of your screen a black bar that will have some options for you, or it might be at the top of your screen. You'll have two options, one of which says Q&A, and the other of which says chat. If you'd like for your questions or comments to be viewable by everyone, then you're going to want to type into the chat. If you type Q&A, then James and I are the only two people who will be able to see your questions, and we'll be happy to read them out. But we want to give you an opportunity to sort of interact with one another as well. So that's just a little information about Zoom if you've never joined us before. If any of you are having trouble hearing us, or if you are able to hear us, again, if you'll type into the chat just where you're joining us from, and then if you're able to hear us, we'd like to do a quick sound check before we proceed with the webinar. Hi, Rebecca, you're waving your hand.
I was going to say.
I didn't even know you could do that. I'm learning something new. Natalie, glad to have you joining us from Orland Park. We'll give it about one more minute and then we'll get started. If anyone has been unable to join us, I know I have at least heard back from two teachers who said, I can't join at that time, I have to teach. So we understand that educators, have busy school days, and some of you are on spring break, and some of you are still busily either recovering from spring break or anticipating spring break. So we understand. We're going to make a recording of this available for you to get on-demand access, and if you have anyone that you want to share this with, you'll have that link available to you as soon as the webinar is complete. So you can view this later. You can share pieces of it with anyone that you think might find value in it, and anyone who you feel like needs to see it, feel free to share that link with us. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is TJ Hoffman, and I am the Director of Customer Success at Sydney, and excited to be hosting this webinar today with James Likis, who is joining us from Boston, from DIY Coaching Boston, and who I'm very excited to have a really great conversation with. A little bit about James before I hand it over to him and allow him to talk a little bit more about DIY coaching. James is a graduate of Brandeis University and completed the Boston Teacher Residency. He also just recently completed the Hollyhock Fellowship at Stanford Graduate School of Education. So an excellent educational pedigree, lots of wonderful training. He co-facilitated a partnership with the Boston Collegiate Charter School focused on developing instruction and systematic academic interventions, which is a large part of what I think a lot of us are focused on. So I'm excited about his expertise Additionally, he's got 6 years teaching experience, teaching 9th and 10th grade mathematics, something that I have a great deal of respect for, because if you can teach Algebra 1, I think you can teach pretty much anything. And then he's also worked at the Jeremiah Burke High School in Dorchester, Maryland, where they were the first Maryland high school to Massachusetts high school to successfully exit turnaround status, which is awesome. So lots of expertise, lots of experience, and now he is turning that around and supporting other teachers through the DIY coaching program. And James, if you'd like to talk a little bit more about that, tell us about that experience and what services you offer to the educator community.
Uh-oh.
Did we freeze?
Cool. Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
We did briefly. I think we're back.
Okay, good.
So me and my colleague Jennifer Glenn started DIY coaching a little over a year ago now. We met together doing a math fellowship with a philanthropic organization in Boston called EdVestors. And so the problem we identified was that instructional coaching isn't something that's consistent across Boston schools, both district schools and charter schools. And not particularly surprisingly, there's a strong correlation between the availability of coaching for teachers and student success. And so that's kind of where our model came from. The DIY part of DIY coaching means teachers are doing it themselves. So they're using video to reflect on their practice. And we're bringing them together monthly to engage in coaching conversations with one another, but also appreciating the fact that looking at your own instruction is jolting at times, uncomfortable at others, and it takes a little bit of getting used to. So we kind of cut the year into thirds, where the first third of the year folks are just getting used to watching themselves on video, seeing what they see in their classrooms. Then the middle third, we start transitioning to having those coaching conversations so teachers continue to watch their own practice, but are also seeing colleagues, and then having these coaching conversations as peer coaches. And then the last third of the year is just like full-fledged coaching. We're kind of done with the adding new knowledge and really just getting people into the practice of coaching one another and coaching themselves through video.
Well, that's really awesome. And I know that as a person who previously worked in professional development in some large urban school districts, that can be a huge challenge. And I am excited because I know that it's central to Sydney's mission that we put teacher development back in the hands of teachers and back into classrooms. So one of the things that we really like about DIY is your focus on teachers supporting one another and that collaborative model of professional development, which is really cool. So speaking of collaborative learning, so I have a list of questions that James and I talked about ahead of time that we're prepared to discuss. We sort of have two big topics of conversation today. The first of which is goal setting for teachers. It's a sort of hot topic in education and in professional development and instructional coaching right now. What is a good way to set goals for educators? And I think that James's model and the DIY model of allowing teachers to set their own goals is really, really powerful. So we're going to talk about that. And then additionally, how to motivate teachers, how teachers can motivate themselves, how teachers can motivate one another towards meeting those goals, and towards the difficult process that James just identified of sort of getting comfortable watching yourself teach, which is a new experience for a lot of people. But as we go through this conversation, if questions or comments or ideas or anything come up for you, feel free to share them in the chat, because we do want this to be an interactive conversation and we want everyone to have an opportunity to join. If you're joining this webinar from a recording, feel free to email me at thomash@cbhi.com, and I'll feel free to continue this conversation beyond the one time limit that we've set here. We're really focused on making learning happen anytime, anywhere, and so the more that we can open up that freedom, the better. But James, let's just talk first about the process that you use
Mm-hmm.
for setting goals, and sort of the key elements that you suggest if teachers are doing this work for the first time, maybe in a PLC or on a campus or across campuses? What are some good steps to start with?
So the biggest thing for us is again, like having people meet monthly. So our timeline is folks start videotaping September, October, November, and we're not asking them to actually set a goal until December. So I would say one of the biggest things is just opening up the flexibility and the opportunity for people to really start engaging with their practice through video before they worry about getting very specific in terms of what a goal might be for them. What we've learned from seeing our participants go through this process is there's a lot of folks who came in like, yep, I know exactly what I want to focus on. Like, I know why I'm doing this. I know what I'm looking for. And then as soon as they actually started watching their instruction.
Oh, you froze.
Back via video.
There you go. We're going to give it a second. James just froze.
Video, and like every single time they watch their goal. Other times it's just, sorry.
You're back. You're good.
I don't know where. Yeah. All right. So I'll go back, and hopefully I don't repeat myself too much. What I was saying is that because we give folks a couple months to identify their goal, usually what happens is that folks come in saying right off the bat that they know what they want to focus on in their instruction. But as they actually start engaging with video and having multiple opportunities to see what's going on in their classrooms, their goal starts shifting. So it was important for us not to demand people to come to a particular focus area too quickly, because that like inquiry process of continually learning more about your practice and getting more and more curious about what it is that you actually want to move forward to impact students, we really value that. So we try and afford them a good amount of time to make that decision.
So that's really interesting. I mean, I think that this is true. I know in the state of Texas, where I am and where I worked in school districts, that there's some flexibility at the beginning of the school year where teachers are not required to set goals.
I think I'm frozen again.
Oh. I hear you. You're good, but I may be frozen. That for a lot of people, the very first professional growth conversation takes place at that sort of initial coaching conversation between, whether it be an appraiser and a coach, or between a PLC team or an instructional coach. And the very first conversation is, all right, what's our goal going to be this year? But what you're saying is that there actually is some sort of discovery that takes place, and that there's real time made for that, maybe a couple of months of just sort of with that beginner's mindset, watching yourself teach and then using that information to decide on a goal, or to maybe change a goal that you thought you had to begin with. So in that process, are there clearly defined roles on your team where the teachers who are participating in this sort of act as coaches to one another, or does the teacher do all their own guiding? What does that sort of look like? What does the interaction between people look like?
Yeah, I was going to say one thing also that we keep in mind at the beginning is in Jim Knight's Focus on Teaching, he talks about how when teachers first watch their videos, he recommends watch it one time, don't even comment on anything, just like bear the brunt of being uncomfortable watching yourself before you even try and watch it to figure out what you're actually doing in your practice. So we adhere a lot to that style of thinking as well. In terms of who guides it, this process is entirely individual teacher driven. So it's their own learning experience, their own learning journey. So at the beginning of the year, they're the only person seeing their videos. I have access as the administrator for the platform through SIBME, that I can go see any video that anybody has posted. But at the same time, it's really not, it's not about me. It's about individuals figuring out what they want to focus on and figuring out how they want to move their practice forward. So in terms of once we reach sort of the mid-year mark, once teachers start coaching one another, then it is putting the onus on each individual to say, if TJ is my partner, I'm sharing this video, this is what I want you to focus on, this is what I want to have a coaching conversation around. But we're not making anybody adhere to, because that was your goal, conversation one that has to continue to be your goal conversation two. And by giving people that time to kind of work through, again, like be curious about their practice and grow in their awareness and in their comfort of using video as a tool, they just get closer and closer, or they just continue moving and eventually end up in a spot where they feel like what they're focusing on is really meaningful for their practice. So it's entirely teacher driven, but then the peer accountability starts kicking in to help people get a little bit more clear, because it's going to be difficult to coach somebody on a particular goal if they can't tell you exactly what that goal is. And we really want it. We want the coaching to be driven by the person whose instruction is being analyzed, not by what an outsider thinks about their instruction.
That's really interesting. You know, that idea of refining your, you used the word inquiry earlier, and I'm reminded of a process that we used in a school district that I worked here in Texas, where we would sort of go through this inquiry cycle where we would decide on some sort of, we didn't call it a goal, but we call it a focus question, but that question in and of itself could be refined over time, but that when there is this flexibility and when the learning is driven by the teacher themselves, they're able to say, okay, you know, when I walked in the first day, I thought that my problem was classroom management, but what I'm realizing is that I'm not asking enough higher order questions so that students become engaged. You know, I mean, that might be an example of a place where that shifts. And if you stay focused on learning classroom management strategies and don't ever make that transition, then when you get to the end of the year, you might actually not have improved instruction the way that you intended to do, right? And that can be a huge issue. So I guess my next question, and it's a loaded question, and you're prepared for it, is, you know, in this conversation, what role does an administrator play in this teacher's growth?
Yeah, so the answer is they don't play one. So we've got, at this point, we've got 28 teachers that are coming together. There's 3 cohorts. So we have multiple teachers from a couple of schools, but a lot of teachers are just coming to us for a professional learning opportunity outside of their building. So there's really no interaction with their administrators at all. Another part, just kind of building off what you were just saying, TJ, in terms of where to focus. We do have teachers get into content specific cohorts. So we have 2 math groups. So it's everybody, we have K to 12 in terms of teachers, but they're all focused on their math instruction. So that is a way to help them move forward their math pedagogical content knowledge. So we are hoping that people move beyond, I'm focusing on classroom management, and instead start thinking about behaviors that are happening in their classroom, but through the lens of specifically teaching math, or in the case of our other cohort, science teachers, thinking about how they teach science. So most teachers are, if their school has a priority in terms of like increasing student talk, that's kind of where their mind's at. But we're trying to do a little bit of addition in terms of adding a little bit more in terms of pedagogical content knowledge and getting people thinking about that, getting them thinking about the standards of mathematical practice, the next generation science standards, their practice standards, and sort of have those ideas in everybody's mind, but still leaving it entirely open up to the teacher to figure out where they want to focus. And so that's where it's like we try and blend the earlier question about like, how do you guide goal setting? It's like, we're not telling anybody what to set their goals around, but we are having, as a group, engaging in some learning around what are kind of best practices in terms of thinking about high quality math instruction or high quality science instruction.
I love it. And so that sort of team-based approach is really valuable in helping move from the what to the how, right? I mean, you know, where you've got these big overarching campus-wide or maybe district-wide goals that exist that a teacher knows they have in the back of their mind, and a good, thoughtful teacher knows these things. A good, thoughtful educator knows, okay, well, I know that guiding reading strategies are something that are really powerful and really important to my campus right now, and I know why, because we need to improve our literacy scores or whatever that sort of thing is. But
right.
They memorize guided reading strategies and then don't really know how to fold those into their instruction. And this idea of, okay, what is the relationship between increasing student talk and science instruction? What is the relationship between classroom management and math pedagogy? Those sort of intersectional areas is where those deep conversations take place. And the thing that I really like about what y'all are doing is that it is a conversation. And so the next sort of topic that I'd like to talk about is, so we've gone from the position of, as the teacher, they watch themselves for time, they give themselves some feedback, they sort of hone in on a specific goal that can change, but is at least sort of a starting off point over a couple of months, and then they engage with a collaborative team of other educators, be it around pedagogy or instruction or content area, and then what happens? So what's the next process? Sort of how does this sort of partnership coaching work once the goal has been set?
Yeah, so the main text we use to anchor our conversations and just sort of the attitude we want to promote around coaching is a book called Coaching Conversations, aptly named, but it focuses on balancing the point of the conversation being to increase the capacity of the coachee to identify and solve their own problems. So basically it starts with identifying a goal early in the conversation or before the conversation in our case, and then leading where if I'm the coach and we're talking about somebody else's video, I'm giving some value, I'm asking clarifying questions, so really trying to better understand what was going on in their classroom. I'm offering some...
Oh, hang on a second. Pause. Let's let your internet
some value statements and do that or align to their student that they were striving for. All right.
You're good.
Did you hear clarifying questions?
I heard clarifying questions. Yeah, so let's start from there.
All right. So then value statements is the next part. Value statements are a way to express, the coach can express and validate different ways that the coachee helped meet their goals, moves that they made that were particularly high leverage, or things that they just particularly enjoyed in what they saw in somebody else's classroom. The last part's the most important part. So that's reflective questions and possibilities. So it's asking questions that the coach does not know the answer to, and the goal of them is to promote the thinking of the coachee. So we're asking about different possibilities. Did they consider this? Was there something else they were thinking? What were the implications of a move that they made? And so the goal of the conversation is that the coachee is doing the vast majority of the talking. The coach is there to basically pepper with questions, help build up the coachee's self-value and that understand that they are doing things great in their classroom, but really getting the coachee to think about what are different things I could have done and helping them identify their own solutions. And that's where at the end we wrap up with just identifying next steps. And those are coachee driven. So whatever the person wants to take away from the conversation, whatever changes they see as helpful to their practice, they're the one who makes that decision. I, as the person who is kind of coaching them,
we're paused again. It seems we've frozen. Let's give James a second to try and catch up. Oh, I heard something for a second. I can see you.
I'm here now.
You're good. Okay. I, as the person who is coaching them, was the last thing that we heard.
Got it. As a person who's coaching them, I'm not identifying any of their takeaways. I'm not telling them what they need to do to move their instruction forward. I'm just helping them think through their options and helping them identify their own solutions. So it's not about advice giving. It's not about telling somebody what they need to do. It's about really just promoting the growth of the person who was whose video we had watched and who's trying to move their practice forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's something that's sort of a place where a lot of the missions between what DIY is doing and what Sydney is sort of designed to facilitate is that, you know, we all know as educators that we've got to move beyond the idea that the fun little, the rhyming versions are, we're moving from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. And we know we're supposed to do that in the classroom, but so much of professional learning continues to be that old model of let's have a workshop, let's have some sort of thing, and moving towards a more partnership model where the teacher is driving their own growth. And I think the area that I really like about the sort of refinement that I see in what y'all are doing is that the beginning of that process really starts with some freedom for the teacher to really dive into their own practice before they ever walk into these conversations. But that there's a depth of knowledge about their own instruction that they're able to initiate those conversations with. Do the conversations happen? And we're going to talk a little bit about, because I think if I were a school leader, the question I would have is, okay, but how do you monitor that? How do you have accountability about that? And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But before we do that, I just want to sort of finish up this idea of moving from a goal that is something that I sort of set at the beginning of the year and then forget about forever, towards something that really is a big part of a cycle of learning that takes place. But my last sort of question about that is the relationships between those two people who are participating in that coaching conversation, or maybe it's multiple people participating in the coaching conversation. Mm-hmm. Is that an ongoing relationship between the same people, or do you sort of move in and out with different groups of people at a time?
Yeah, so what we try and do is we try and set everybody up into triads, because we know that, things are going to come up, somebody's going to miss a meeting, but those are like sacred in the sense that those are the people who you're always going to be talking about. So it's also, there's a lot of trust building that happens, being in each other's classrooms via video, having vulnerable conversations, promoting reflection with each other. So yeah, that's going to be the same.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more uncomfortable than having to sit next to someone and sort of say these vulnerable things about yourself to a person that you may not have that trusting relationship with. So, and Jim talks about it in Focus on Teaching, that there's sort of two sides of that. I have to trust you, but I also have to trust me. And sort of spending that time building that trust on both ends is really, really valuable and very powerful. So is there anything else before we move on to sort of the accountability side of this and the motivation and all of that sort of stuff to encourage people to participate in this? Is there anything else that you want to talk about with regards to the goal setting process or the coaching process that takes place, the conversations, anything else about that? And then I also want, if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask, if you'll type them into the chat, we'll make sure and discuss those as well before we move on.
Am I there?
Yeah, you're here.
All right. No, I think that's the biggest thing, is that schools and can play a huge role in teacher development, but we start with the getting comfortable with yourself first, because I think it also plays, we're also operating on the theory and
that last part we missed. We're operating on the theory of what?
That once teachers are aware and comfortable with viewing their own practice and have that deeper knowledge of it, that then they're going to be more open to the feedback and to the opportunities that come up. And so it's like hooking their curiosity and then allowing that to continue to carry them forward and help them open to those coaching conversations and to new possibilities that maybe they get from somebody else or maybe they come from themselves.
Yeah, I love that. And that there is a natural curiosity in most educators that encourages us to want to improve, but it can be really, really hard to take that first step. And you referenced early on what Jim talks about in Focus on Teaching, that one of the biggest challenges is just sitting there and watching yourself for the very, very first time on video can be a really difficult process, depending on how comfortable you are with it. We jokingly say that the selfie generation is pretty good at it. They're so used to Snapchats and things like that, but that so many educators are just not used to being on film and being on camera. And if they are, they sort of cringe at it and shy away from it. You have to get over that process before you're able to really, with that curious educator's mind, watch yourself in the classroom and be able to have those reflective conversations. So as we move on to the next topic, which is where I think, if I can just sort of pay you a compliment, where I think y'all have really figured out a key component, it's that movement from, okay, we're going to give people freedom, but they're still going to have expectations, and how to help people maintain a clear set of actions that they have to take while having the freedom to get comfortable with something over time. One of the challenges that we see so often with clients is that, and I think we just lost James, so I'm going to kill time while he rejoins. One of the challenges that we see so often with clients, that you're back.
Yes.
One of the things we see so often with people who use SIBME for the first time is they say, oh, well, we're going to give people the opportunity to sort of try this out and see what works. And it can be really hard to get off the ground because there aren't clear expectations at the outset of what needs to happen. So you've done a really interesting thing. You've sort of got a process in place where you've got those 2 months of time where teachers are not sharing video necessarily with one another. They have the opportunity to watch themselves teach, but then you still are collecting information and using that information to motivate teachers towards professional growth. And why don't you talk a little bit about that so that we can sort of understand how you're facilitating that?
Yeah. So just first and foremost, the incentive for us, or for teachers who are participating in DIY coaching, is that we have a graduate course through a university up here outside of Boston. So they are getting graduate credits for participating. And so as part of that, and then part of also as our thinking about it evolved, we tried to get really specific about what we were expecting of participants. So 2 videos a month, at least 30 total minutes of instruction, however they want to divvy that up. Works about 10 times per video. And so naming that ahead of time, and then once they move to coaching conversations, those same types, and those are like that type of engagement that we're looking for from folks. In addition to analyzing the videos and sort of a what, so what, now what type of protocol in terms of what did you see, so what do you want to do, or so what are you thinking, now what do you want to do? So we got really clear on that. At the mid-year point, what we did is we basically sent every participant an email that said the biggest things we paid attention to were videos uploaded, total instructional hours uploaded, comments made. And so we sent an email to every participant where we would say, the average for the group is blank videos. You've uploaded this many videos. The average amount of time is blank. You've uploaded this much. The average number of comments is this. You've uploaded this much. And so it was a way for us to celebrate success for the folks who had done an unbelievable job. Like, we reached the midway point, and I think there was somebody who had uploaded almost 20 hours of video, which based on our expectations, they should have been at like 3. So that was great. But then it's also a way for us to let people know who are just like kind of moving along right at the pace to say, you know, you're exactly where you need to be. Like these are the averages and this was our expectation and this is where you're at. So you're doing fine. But then also to flag folks whose participation might have been lagging a little bit. And that wasn't to be punitive by any means. It was just to acknowledge this is what the average participation rate is. This is the expected participation rate. Those two things are different, and this is yours. And just allowing us to have conversations with folks at that point about, is it a technological challenge? Is it a scheduling challenge? Are you just having trouble following through? Where are you at? And really just engage people in a dialogue about where they were currently at in their participation, where they wanted to be. So we tried to do this in a way that was non-threatening, because it, and compared to their peers, to help increase that motivation.
Oh, I think we just lost a very crucial statement because I heard the word non-threatening, and
yes.
then okay. So what happened after that?
Non-threatening and non-evaluative. The goal is just to increase the motivation by just showing folks where they're at compared to their peers, in a way that again is not threatening, but just to acknowledge this is where you're at and this is where other folks are at. And
I like how you're using, and I'm sorry if I just cut you off, but you froze. Where do you want to be? Yeah. So that there are a couple of elements in this. And if you're unfamiliar, just for our participants, if you're unfamiliar with the Sydney platform, and this is not designed to be a demo of the Sydney platform, you're welcome to reach out to me if you'd like one of those. But the platform facilitates the ability to sort of watch a video and then make comments either to someone else or for yourself, where you're making some sort of either qualitative or quantitative assessment of what's going on at specific moments throughout the video. So at 2 minutes in, that was a great question that I asked that kid, or at 4 minutes in, these 3 students were not engaged in the instruction. So those sorts of things. And what James was referencing when he said 10 comments per month is that that was sort of the number of times throughout a video or a set of videos that a teacher would make those sorts of comments. But the key element that I thought was really interesting is that there's some real flexibility in this for you. That it's not, you're going to upload 2 videos per month, but rather we would like for you to upload X number of videos and more specifically, X number of minutes of videos, because different classrooms, it means different things. You know, if I'm going to watch 40 minutes of handing out paper, first of all, there's something wrong with that classroom if you're spending 40 minutes handing out paper, but also that's not a really high leverage experience. So that idea of using time rather than quantity of videos, I think is really, really powerful. I might decide that over my 30 minutes for a month that I want to upload, because of my goal, I want to upload just the first 5 minutes of instruction a dozen times, or the first 2 minutes of instruction a certain number of times, so that I'm really able to see, do I have a strong start to my classroom? Or how am I ending classrooms? Or how am I making a transition from large group instruction to small group instruction? All of those sorts of really focused, reflective moments is a really powerful thing. So I think that that's really good, that flexibility to do that. But the other thing that I think is really interesting is the fact that you're not saying the bar was here and you were here and everybody else was here, but rather the bar was here and the average among everyone else who participated was right here and your place is X. You know, I've been a part of teams before where we're very public about accountability, and we say, you know, that James did this and TJ did this and Roger did this and Elizabeth did this, and it's all public and everything, and that can be a really almost uncomfortable situation. But the fact that you're using averages to say the average number of videos that were uploaded this month was this, and you are either at it, above it, or below it, is really, really powerful, I think. That sort of anonymity in where I lie amongst my peers, but you are using peer groups to drive that conversation. And you sort of alluded to it, but I'd like for you to just elaborate a little bit more. What happens on the rare occasions when someone isn't meeting that sort of, they're below average in terms of what they're doing in the platform?
Yeah, so what we did at that point is we just set up a time to actually connect one-on-one with those folks and just better understand what was going on for them. I mean, everybody who knows who's been in the classroom, right? Like there's different times a year where different things come up and your priorities are going to ebb and wane. But at the same time, it's just helping them re-ground themselves and like, what was why am I doing this to begin with? And so that's where it's like our evaluation or our speaking poorly or kind of blaming or making anybody like feel bad through an evaluative lens is really like secondary to us, because people are doing this, people are joining DIY coaching because they want to do it. So I'm going to approach people through the lens of, you want to do this. So what are the obstacles that are hurting you in making that progress? So one person, for instance, had like an older iPad that was struggling to upload directly through the app. So then we go troubleshoot that with her. She'd been voicing that concern, but it hadn't gotten all the way to me and other facilitators who could help solve that issue. So then we're able to remedy that, and now she's right back on track. Somebody else was having a tough time putting together a schedule. So I just put it on my calendar. I just shoot them an email on Tuesday morning, and they said that's the day they want to record. So I just check in with them and give them a little reminder. I'm sure that doesn't mean they record themselves every Tuesday, but it's like, it's a small lift for me to help them meet the goals that they set for themselves and like continue to just respect and value their autonomy and their professionalism as an educator who's committed to improving. And so that's really, we try and take every issue that comes up through that lens in terms of people to meet their goals.
Yeah, and again, just to sort of pause and take a second to talk quickly about SIBME, we're talking about numbers, and these are numbers that our analytics dashboard sort of facilitates. So you're able to pull this information for an individual user, for everyone on your team through that tool. So, but the thing that I like about this is that it can be tempting in a team of people to simply say, you have not met this expectation, and we're all adults, and the expectation is that you meet expectations. And I think that especially if you're in a position of influence over a person who might be either an employee, if you're an administrator at a school and you're talking to a teacher or something like that, and you might get compliance out of them, but will you actually get the ultimate goal, which is you want all teachers to be focused on growth. And so because you don't have that stick to sort of motivate people, you're forced to use the carrot side of it, the support, the what can I do to help you overcome whatever you at least think is keeping you from doing this. And so, in that, well, first of all, how successful has that been? And I guess the next question is, does the first objection always result in the problem going away? Or is there sometimes a couple of objections that you have to sort of patiently get through before people are on board?
Patience is always a good thing. So that's definitely been helpful for us. It's not an immediate resolution every time. Sometimes it is. Sometimes there really is just like not technical in the sense of SIBME, but just like there's a quick solution type of problem. But then other times, it does take a process. And what we're trying to do is we're again trying to shift the idea of like, how does coaching work? And so if you're committed to getting better, we're trying to shift your mindset to say, if you can get in the habit of recording yourself you're going to see a lot of benefit from just reflecting on your own practice. And so like that's a mindset shift, which then is going to lead to an effort shift. And so we're just really trying to help coach people through that process. To be in a place where they feel really empowered to make for themselves.
Yeah, and so moving towards, and you froze up for a second, but I think we caught everything. I'm just going to paraphrase. Moving towards that autonomy, the old world educanese version of it was that whole like I do, we do, you do sort of thing that I learned in my elementary methods class 100 years ago. But that you're doing that with the teacher themselves, also recognizing that education is not a thing that we're ever going to finish knowing how to do. That it's something that I will always be focused on, but that at different points throughout my career, I'm maybe the only person focused on my growth as an educator. Mm-hmm. And in those situations, I have to be able to find a way to drive my own personal development. And that's true in different contexts. If I'm an AP chemistry teacher who may be the only AP chemistry teacher on my campus, or if I'm a GT teacher at an elementary school and there's no one else who's teaching the sorts of students that I'm teaching, all these sorts of sort of unique groups. But even groups who are part of big teams, sometimes you find yourself on a campus where people are just not collaborative and you need to still be focused on your own growth. It can be easy in those situations to just say, well, it's not a priority to anybody else, so it doesn't have to be a priority to me. And it sounds like what y'all are focused on is ensuring that that every educator who goes through DIY coaching is able to coach themselves at the mm-hmm. end. That they're able to sort of have that mentality of saying, I am going to frequently watch myself teach, reflect on my own instruction, and find ways to improve. And that's powerful. That's mm-hmm. incredibly powerful. And I can think at every level, from the classroom through to the school board room, that everyone would really like to see a world where teachers are focused on their own development. I think one of the mistakes that some schools make, and the thing that I really like about what y'all are doing, is recognizing that when it doesn't happen, it's not necessarily because the teacher doesn't want it to happen. They might just need that additional support, that patience. When things maybe don't work exactly right, you're willing to sit through this. When the webinar freezes up for a second, you're able to sort of sit and patiently know that our goal is still learning. And so I guess in these last few minutes, just sort of talk a little bit about the outcomes. When the end of the year comes around, what is it that people walk away from DIY with the ability to do?
So the comfort and ability to watch their own instruction and analyze it to come up with their own next steps in like the type of way that they would get through an outsider coming in and coaching them. Increased capacity in terms of their ability to have those types of coaching conversations with colleagues. So they're doing it with colleagues in DIY coaching, but being able to take that back. That's a transferable skill to their school community, to talk with another teacher about instruction or talk with anybody about any goal in terms of having a style of coaching conversation where you're leaving the other person better for it. And then with all of that increased comfort with instruction and like developing their pedagogical content knowledge for their particular content area, we're hoping to just leave people feeling better positioned and stronger as instructional leaders to impact change back at their school community.
I love that an instructional leader is not necessarily a job title or a pay grade or something like that, but that it's a mindset, that it's a person, and that old proverb, each one reach one, each one teach one, that if we each go back and sort of turn that mindset around onto someone else, that it can just be transformative in a school or in a school district. Facing the big problems that that are happening in Boston and are happening in Houston and are happening in Grand Rapids and everywhere in between. Those are real opportunities for all of us. So that's really exciting, and I appreciate that. So we've got about 10 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, I hope that you'll type into the chat, share your questions with us. We would love to hear from you. And if not, then I'm going to just sort of say if you'd like to know anything more about SIBME, feel free to visit our website, which is just sibme.com, SIBME.com. You can also find us on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and all those other places, except for Pinterest, because I haven't started the Pinterest channel, sorry. Or I don't even know if it's called a channel. That's how not adept at that I am. But we'd love to talk to you. And James, if people want to find out more about DIY coaching, how can they do that?
You can just shoot us an email at DIYcoachingboston@gmail.com. And we'll definitely get back to you. We're happy to spread what we've learned and help others take this kind of approach to help empower teachers and move instruction forward.
Fantastic. Well, seeing no other questions, we'll go ahead and give 9 minutes back to you, maybe a little extra break in the day. But James, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. And like I said, this is going to be available on demand. So if you're following along on video, you know how to get a hold of us. And we hope that you have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, TJ. Sorry for the choppy internet from Boston Public Schools right here, but I'm happy to be with you and hope everybody enjoyed.
All right, thanks. Y'all have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye-bye.